Welcome to GapMaps. This video will give you an overview of the functionality in GapMaps Live to effectively use the platform. In this video, we'll cover adding new locations, the pin panel, where we'll look at catchments, confidential information and tenant finder, reports, where we'll look at the demographics report and business export, business locations, generators, layers, and finally integrations with Cordell and commercial real estate. To begin, once you log into GapMaps, you'll be faced with a map of your country. On the left-hand side here are where your core modules live, which will allow you to see things at a macro level across your map. We'll begin with company locations, which is where your own network will live. This will be broken down into any business units that you have, followed with categories for you to save your locations into. The intention of these categories is to mirror your internal pipeline for your assets. In our case, the categories we have are existing, closed, under construction, and proposed. If you do need any additional categories or would like to change the name of any that you have on your account, get in touch with the GapMaps Client Services team. The last folder that you have is called Search Locations, which is just down the bottom here. Search Locations is an account-specific folder, which allows you and only you to see the location saved there. This feature is great if you're doing initial analysis on a site and are not ready to share it with your colleagues yet. Let's take a look at how to add a new location. We can do so by going to Search Location at the top of the section and typing the address for the site into this bar here. If you don't have an address, things like city, suburb, or business will also work. Once you've entered your search criteria, select your location from the drop-down bar, and a pin will appear on the map. Over on the right-hand side, the pin panel's now appeared, and the first thing that we'll need to do is save our site. Save to Search Locations goes to the account-specific folder that we spoke about, and today we'll be saving to company locations. You can change the name of your site in the title section, or go straight to Business Pool, select the business unit you wish the location to be saved under, and then select the relevant category. Hit Save when you're happy with your changes, and it will appear on the map. Let's go ahead and zoom to our location and take a further look at what we can do within the pin panel. Firstly, clicking on Label will display the name of the label, which is great for centering where you are when you're looking at multiple sites at once. You can also move the pin to a more appropriate location if your pin's not quite in the right location. If you ever need to update the category in which your pin's saved, you can do so via the drop down here and just select the category that you'd like the pin to move to. In the pin panel, you can access Street View, which gives you access to Google Street View and performs exactly as you would expect it to. There's also a full screen toggle button in the top right corner. We'll move into catchments now. In GapMaps, we have 4 different catchment types that you can create to analyse your locations depending on the location type and where it's situated. The first thing that you'll notice here is that there's already a 3-kilometre radius assigned to this pin. This is what's referred to as your default radius. Yours may be smaller or larger than the one that's in the video today, but will be across every site across GapMaps, whether it's your own locations, business locations, or generators, and is there for ease of use. Keep in mind that you can have as many catchments as you like assigned to a pin, so what we'll do is go ahead and create another radius. We'll select Add, name the catchment, and adjust the size down in the bottom here. Once we're happy with our selections, we'll select Save, and the 5-kilometre radius will appear on the map. Next we have Trade Area, which allows us to draw our own catchment. This is particularly useful in cases where we have things like the natural barrier, in our case the Yarra River over to the west-hand side here. I'll select Add, and begin to draw my catchment by clicking points on the map with the left-hand button on my mouse. Once I'm happy with the selections that I've made, I'll double click to lock it in, name my catchment, and click Save. Travel catchments look at both walking and driving in both time and distance. We'll select Add to begin and be faced with a form. From here, we'll need to select our travel type, our time in minutes for the drive, let's look at 7 minutes in this case, and then select our day and time. Don't forget to name your catchment, and select Process once you're ready. Now we can see what a 7-minute drive in any location from my pin looks like. We can go ahead and create another travel catchment for comparative purposes should we require, and this can be done across any catchment type. Once again, we'll hit add and follow that same process. In this case, we'll look at a 15-minute drive. As you can see, now we've got 2 travel catchments assigned to the pin, and we can see both of them on the map. The last catchment type we'll be covering in this video is layer-based. Layer-based catchments allow us to create catchments out of predetermined geographical areas as small as statistical area level 1 all the way up to local government areas. We'll go ahead and select add. We'll select our census here, in this case we'll use 2021, and then select the geographical area we'd like to work with. In this case we'll use suburbs. The suburb boundaries will appear on the map. We can then hover over any of these areas, and in the top right corner you'll see the population for that region. I'll single click on my mouse to select the regions I'd like to include in my catchment, and if I make a mistake and include something that I don't want included, I just click it again to remove it. We'll then enter a catchment name and select save. Now that we've taken a look at the 4 different catchment types GapMaps has on offer, we'll have a look at some things that we can do with them. You'll notice across all of the catchments assigned to this pin that all of the buttons on them are the same. We have Report, Show, Info, Edit, Export, and Style available. The first thing that we'll do is take a look at Report. I'm going to visualize the 3-kilometer catchment and select the Report button, which will open up the demographics report in a new tab on my browser. One of the great things about the demographics report is that we can export it to either PDF or CSV using these buttons in the top right corner. This way we can share the demographics report with stakeholders that work outside the platform or use it for further analysis in Excel. Scrolling down, you'll see the report's quite large, where it breaks down the demographics in more detail. It's broken down between defined area, state, and country, where defined area looks at the information of what's inside the catchment we've pulled the report for. You may find with the size of this report, particularly as you're getting started with GapMaps, that there's information that may not be relevant to you. In that case, you can let client services know of the data tables you'd like to remove, and we can help you customize the report. Back in GapMaps, we'll have a look at the other things we can do with catchments. The next button is the Show Hide button, which allows us to determine which catchments are visualized on the map. Let's take a look at what a 3-kilometer radius and a 5-kilometer radius look like at the same time, and then overlay the 15-minute drive. If you ever want to hide a catchment, just hit that same button again to hide them. The next button is Info, which gives us a high-level demographic snapshot of the information within that catchment. You can use the Edit button to do things like rename or delete the catchment that you've created. We'll loop back to Export shortly in this video. And finally, we're looking at Style. Style will allow us to change the look and feel of a catchment's colour, outline, or opacity. Clicking Style, we can select a fill colour by clicking the colour box and selecting the preferred colour. Click Outside, and then you can have a look at the changes you'd like to apply it to, whether you'd like it permanently for all users, temporarily, or permanently only for yourself. Click Save, and the catchment colour will update. Moving on in the pin panel, the next section that we'll be taking a look at is Confidential Details. Confidential Details allows GapMaps to be a single point of information for your network. You can do things such as attach notes, files, and photos to the pin. Or if you have consistent pieces of data that you capture across your network, GapMaps can also create a data table where you can capture this information. For the example we have in our video today, we can attach pieces of data like the amount of point of sale terminals, along with who the store manager is, whether it has a drive-through, and the store type. This data can be imported in bulk into GapMaps if you have it available, can be added individually to each pin, and can also be exported from GapMaps. The next sections that we'll be taking a look at now are business locations and generators. Business locations allow us to see points of interest and competitors on the map and is broken down into classifications. The business locations button is the second module down on the left-hand side of the screen, and once that's open, you can select the classification you'd like to see on the map. In this case, we'll use childcare. You'll see a breakdown of all the brands that GapMaps has available for you to view, and you can then select those categories you wish to see. In this case, we're going to use All Long Daycare, and we'll see all of those pins appear on the map. Now that we can see where all the long daycare centres are across Australia, we can hover over any of these pins to see the names of them. We can click on any pin, and the pin panel for that location will open. You'll notice the pin panel looks almost identical to the pin that we had on our own sites. Expanding catchments, you can also see the default radiuses there. Another interesting thing to note is that where GapMaps can find publicly available information, so in the All Long Daycare case, we'll look at Asequa data, we can read that information under the site details section here. A good indicator that the point of interest or generator has that information available is when you hover over, a black box will appear with those data points. Also across business locations, there's a few more things that we can do. When you have any category selected, and this functionality works across your own network as well, the Tools menu will appear, which are these 3 dots on the right-hand side. Click on Tools to expand it, and then you can see that we have a few options. The first is Labels, which will allow all of the names of the sites to appear on the map. If you click Default Radii, the default radius of 3 kilometers will appear around every site in that category. If you find it's a bit too large, like in our case here, just at the top where we have a drop down, you can select it from here and adjust the size to something that suits you better. This will give you a very high level understanding of any gaps that are in the network or their saturation in market. Lastly, in the Tools section, where we have that publicly available information we looked at earlier, you can also filter by it. Open Filter Locations, select the metadata field that you'd like to filter by, and enter the criteria you'd like to see. You'll then see only the pins that match your criteria appearing on the map. You can also see as many business locations on the map at a time as you wish. So if we wanted to compare where all long daycares in Australia are to where all supermarkets are on the map, we can also click on something like the Coles section to visualise that as well. The next section that we'll be covering is generators. Generators work very much the same as business locations do. However, generators' intention are to show you places that generate foot traffic, things like schools, hospitals, shopping centres. In this case, let's take a look at primary schools. Once we tick primary schools on, you'll see them appear on the map. As we hover over, we can see whether there's metadata available and what the name of that pin is. We can click on the pin. Once we click on a pin, you can see that the pin panel is almost exactly the same as what we've seen in business locations and company locations. The default catchment is there, and again, you can create as many as you like on these pins as well. The Tools menu is also the same, and you can tick on as many as you like in the same manner. Some interesting generators besides education and shopping centres is traffic count. This information is based off of local council data, and as I tick it on, you'll see the points appear. Now that the traffic points have appeared, we can take a look. This data is based off of road surveillance and count of cars on the roads. If we click on a pin, the pin panel for this will open, and we'll open the site details to read more. We can see the data source of this information is the Victorian Department of Transport, and it breaks down the traffic flow both north-westbound and south-eastbound. Now that we've learnt a bit about how to see points of interest and competitors on the map, you may also find yourself in a position where you'd like a list of these locations that fall within a catchment so that you can analyse that information outside of the platform. To do this, we'll open the pin panel, go to Catchments, visualise the catchment that we're looking to work with, and click Export. What we're asking GapMaps to do here is provide us with a list of businesses that fall within the catchment we're pulling the report for, which in our case is 3 kilometres. I'll expand the section at the top and select the criteria that we're looking at. In our case today, we'll do all long daycare, and we'll also look for a list of primary schools that are in that area as well. Once we're happy with the criteria we've selected, we'll hit Export. Down the bottom, a black box will appear, letting you know that you'll receive an email that contains the report once it's ready to view. Once you've received the email with the business export attached, download it from the email. As this report is in CSV format, it will open in Excel once you've opened it. The headers of this report break down type, classification and company, which outline what you've pulled for this report, which in our case was all long daycare and primary schools. We then have the address information for these areas. And then as we scroll across to the right, we have distance, which is the direct distance from the pin that we pulled the report for to the location in question. This distance is measured in kilometres and can also be referred to as the crow flies. I'll zoom out on this Excel sheet now and scroll across to the right, where we can see that the metadata information attached to those pins is also coming out in the report. The business export can be pulled at any time for any catchment on any pin by clicking the export button on the catchment on the pin you wish to pull it for. The next section that we'll be taking a look at now is layers, which allows us to view demographic information on the map as a thematic layer. The layers section lives on the fourth down on the left-hand side of GapMaps. Opening that will have the different categories available once again. All layers work the exact same way, in which you turn them on to see them by clicking the square, and you can view the legend by selecting the circle. Now that the layer is loaded, as I hover over any of these sections here, in the top right section of my screen, you can read the information box, which gives us more information about that area. The layer that we're looking at here is population by suburb, and we can see in the legend that the deeper the red in colour, the more condensed the population is within that region. As I scroll out, because layers is a module on the left hand side, we're able to see this feature all the way across the map of Australia. We can also see the population goes from red to orange and blue as we go into more regional areas of the state. You can look at other things in layers as well, whether it's things like income, you can select an income layer, or population growth, where you can look at population growth on the map as well. Lastly, in layers you can also create your own using your own data. This section is available as an advanced feature in private layers, and if it's something that you're interested in adding to your account, please get in touch with the GapMaps Client Services team. The last report that we'll be looking at in this video is called the Tenant Finder report, which again is available on any pin in GapMaps. Now we understand who is in the area, we can also use Tenant Finder report to see who isn't in the area but is active in the market. To access the Tenant Finder report, click on Reports within the pin that you'd like to pull this report for. We'll select Add next to Tenant Finder and a form will appear. In this example, we'll consider the location that we have saved here to be an asset that could potentially make a great childcare. So we'd like to understand childcare brands that may be interested in purchasing this site from us. We want to know the childcare brands that are not directly within a certain area, but those brands are present in market because they may be a little further away and may be interested in purchasing or leasing this site from us. To do this, we'll select our classification simply by clicking it or searching for it in the classifications field in the bottom right corner. We'll then select the distances that we'd like to govern this report. We would like to understand childcare centres that have no location within 3 kilometres of our pin, but those childcare brands are present in market because they have at least one location within 50 kilometres. We'll go ahead and name our report and hit generate. Once the report's generated, you'll receive an email letting you know that it's ready to view in platform, and it tells you to log into the GapMaps application to view it. Go back into GapMaps and we'll now be accessing the report section, which is on the left-hand side. Expand the Tenant Finder report section and open the report you wish to view. The report will appear in the middle of the screen and give you a breakdown of the sites that meet your criteria. In our case, childcare centres that have no location within 3 kilometres of our site, but have at least one location within 50 kilometres. There'll be one record of each pin, which is the closest meeting criteria, and again, distance is measured in kilometres as the crow flies. You also have the option to export this report using the export button in the top right corner, which will download the report as a CSV. Finally, we'll be covering the integrations that GapMaps has available. Integrations live in the Integrations module on the left-hand side of the platform. And firstly, we'll be looking at Cordell, which allows you to view development applications on the map. To work with Cordell, the first thing you'll need to do is select a category of the development applications you'd like to see. In this case, what we'll do is childcare. You can then enter things like keywords, type, and estimated value. A required field is project status, where we have different coloured pins which will appear on the map to show us the different types of projects that appear. In our case today, we'll select firm, possible, commenced, and early. The last option for us is status. Status allows us to filter out development applications that either have only been accessed and updated within the last 3 years, or you can also see DAs that have not been updated in 3 years. In this case, we'll keep it to active, which are only DAs that have been updated within the last 3 years. Click Show for those DAs to appear on the map. Now that they've appeared on the map, we can see the different colours of the pins here, and let's go ahead and select a firm pin. Clicking the pin will open the DA summary on the right hand side. From here, we can do things like read details about that development application, the proposed start and end date of the project, along with things like the name and address of the site. The last integration that we'll cover is with commercial real estate. This is a live integration, which means that anything that's on the commercial real estate website will be available to view in GapMaps. To work with commercial real estate integration, select the criteria that you're looking for and select Show. The results will appear on the map as real estate pins. You can then select a pin to open the summary on the right hand side. You can read more about the listing by selecting Show More in the summary section. View images by selecting View Images at the top of the page. Or down the bottom, you can also inquire with Advertiser, which will open the page in a new tab. That's it for the core modules on GapMaps. Now we'll take a look at some basic navigation functionality. If you ever find yourself in a position where you'd like to wipe everything from the map, you can select Clear Map at the bottom of the screen, which will turn everything off. You can also change what the base map looks like by clicking the Base Map button here. By default, Google Maps will be your base map. You can change that clicking this section here and access things such as Google Satellite, or if you'd like a more minimal view that removes some visual noise, the Mapbox Suite base maps are fantastic. Over in the bottom right corner, you have some other navigational features such as Zoom, Rotate, and 3D Tilt, along with Google Pegman, which you can access if you're on any of the Google base maps. Google Pegman can be picked up by left-clicking and dragging onto the map and dropping him on any area where there's a blue outline. This will open Street View in this window here that can be moved around the screen by clicking the 6 dots. You can also resize this Street View by using the arrow in the top right corner. Along the top of the section here, you can see that we've got a measuring tool. The measuring tool will appear in the top right corner and allows you to measure distance or area by clicking points on the map. You can also drop a pin in the middle of the map rather than searching for an address. So as I drag my map to a particular location and zoom in, if I'd like a pin in the middle of my screen, I'll select this drop pin button at the top and a pin will appear. I can then drag and drop the pin to my preferred location and follow the saving process that we went through earlier in this video. Lastly, if you would like to revisit anything that we've covered in this video, GapMaps has help available. In the bottom left of the screen is our support tool. From here, you can begin conversations with us by selecting Send Us a Message, or you can browse any of our help guides by clicking the Help button here. All of our guides are broken down into different topics, and everything covered in this video today is in our Getting Started section. You can access these guides either in platform by clicking on the guide, which will open in a new section here, or you can also open in our Help Centre, which will open in a new tab. If you require further help, please reach out to our client services team either via the chat icon in platform or by emailing us at clientservices@gapmaps.com.